Is President Trump suspicious? Well, it seems like it, and he's suspicious, at least so it appears, about Fort Knox. That is one of the most secure, secretive facilities in the country. So why is the president now ordering an audit? Could it be that he is suspicious how much gold is really inside that vault? That story coming up. Also, this is getting messy. A candidate for U.S. Senate is accused of sending sexually explicit text messages, so now he's trying to clear his name.
Amy and I have a very loving and very happy marriage. They would very much like to try to rip that apart.
Plus, a lesson in what not to bring on a plane.
There's a security detail out there. Someone had a Bluetooth speaker and they named it a certain four-letter word, so they have to inspect the whole aircraft, including the cargo area.
A teen's device with a poorly chosen name caused a transatlantic flight to do a U-turn and return to the United States. Can you guess what the poorly chosen name was? Well, you'll find out. I'm Greta Van Susteren. This is The Record. This is a live look at the White House. Right now, preparations are underway for America 250. That big structure you see is for the UFC match on June 14th. But this week, a new event could be happening, and President Trump wants to headline it. In a Truth Social post, Trump writes in part, quote, I understand artists are getting the yips having to do with their performance on Wednesday, so I'm thinking about bringing the #1 attraction anywhere in the world, the man who gets much larger audiences than Elvis in his prime, and he does so without a guitar, end quote. Well, you know who Trump means by that. He means himself. Trump's request to headline a rally is because several artists have pulled out of the America 250 concert series. Many artists cited threats as a reason to cancel, and others suggested the event was getting too political. A D.C. rally is not the only project, though, that the president is working on. His next one involves gold. Last week, we told you about a former CIA official who was arrested with $40 million worth of gold bars in his home. After this surprise discovery, Trump says it's time to physically audit Fort Knox. Fort Knox is in Kentucky. The highly protected vault holds half of the U.S. government's gold supply. And according to the Treasury Department, that is 147.3 million ounces of gold. That's worth about $670 billion. It's about 370,000 standard gold bars. CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp joins me. Nice to see you, Matt.
Good to see you, Greta.
It's a lot of gold.
Audit the Fed, audit Fort Knox, transparency. I love it.
Where's the other half of this gold, by the way? I mean, if half of it's in Fort Knox, all of a sudden I thought when I was, going through it, I thought, where's the other half?
Well, that's why, the president, when he first got reelected and he was with Elon Musk, I think they said they were going to make a trip down to Fort Knox, and then there was a lot of speculation as to why that trip didn't seem to ever happen. And look, there are all kinds of conspiracy theories. The problem in the modern age is too many of them turn out to be true.
Well, we'll get a little transparency on this. Maybe cameras will follow whoever does the audit. All right.
Let's hope it's not like Geraldo's vault where nothing was there.
Don't pick up for Geraldo. I love Geraldo. All right. I worked with him forever. Okay. Speaking of transparency, which I brought up, Tom Keene, a congressman from New Jersey, where in the world is he?
Well, he's not the only one. I don't know the specifics. I assume it's a health crisis. I think he has.
But he's not
said that
telling
publicly.
anybody.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think you have to in these cases. You hold public office. You're getting paid by the taxpayers. There should be accountability when you miss too many votes. There's been Democrats that have had the same problem. We've had too many episodes where Republicans and Democrats find out like they're in an old folks' home and they basically have dementia and they didn't tell anyone, and that's wrong.
But, even their staffs aren't speaking. Their families not speaking.
Well, they'll get fired. The staff isn't in a position where they have to speak. The member has to speak, and if the member can't speak, then I think it's incumbent on the spouse to speak. And maybe if there's some staff that's willing to be brave, but a staffer that speaks, if the boss tells them not to, is going to get fired.
Well, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson said, and at least was reported, that he spoke to Keene about, the middle of May, and he said he would be returning soon, and he'd be explaining or something soon. And I'm thinking to myself that he has disenfranchised his entire district.
Yeah, and the other thing is it didn't solve anything. Like, sometimes you're quiet about having a health problem because there's nothing anybody can do. But when you're not functioning in the capacity of your job, you can't really take a leave of absence when you're a member of Congress because nobody can step in for your place. In the old days, they used to do what they called pairing. And if one Republican was sick and one Democrat was sick, they kind of cancel each other out. But in today's acrimonious political environment, I can't see that happening.
I can't get, look, I understand not wanting to share your health news with the world, but it sort of goes with the job. If you want privacy, don't take a public job where you're responsible for an entire district.
It'd be different if the Republicans had like a 40-person majority or something, but you're talking about...
No, it wouldn't be.
Essentially, well, but you have the consequences that every vote makes a dramatic impact on all these controversial issues we're talking about.
But suppose that suppose you're going overseas and your passport, you also knows your passport is expired, and you want to call your congressman to see if your congressman will help you, to push through a fast passport. Who are they? Who's his what are they supposed to do? I guess call the senator?
Yeah, or you call the State Department directly. Maybe the Trump administration.
Good luck with that one. You get put on hold.
No, you raise, these are all valid points, and the fact is we need more transparency when you can't vote, which is the essential function of a congressman or a senator.
Well, I go back to what, Trump, whether you like him or not, I know you like him because you're Republican, but even Democrats who don't like him, they should at least admire him for his transparency, because he has completely opened up the White House to the point we're getting a UFC game there, or contest.
Look, in this town, I used to be unique because I was an establishment conservative Republican who liked Trump and thought an outsider would be good. 10 years later, everybody's for Trump. It doesn't feel so lonely. It's nice to have a crowd around you, but you also don't feel so special. It's easy to run with the herd, and Republicans basically run with Trump. But what President Trump has to remember, at the first sign of danger, 80% of these people, swamp creatures, some people call them, they'll turn on him in a second. Just watch. The countdown will start.
Well, the president, though, has he is head of his party, and he's got the midterms coming up. And he said that he doesn't care about the midterms as it relates to his Iranian policy. But, if he neglects the Republicans, if he neglects to care about the midterms, he's going to have a problem come Election Day. And if the Democrats take the House, he's going to have impeachment, and we're going to get turned upside down of what we do in the news.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but, when we have these conversations, there's always a lot of predictions. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And the real thing on the midterms is nobody really knows. Trump's numbers aren't that good with the general population, but they're very strong with Republicans. And Trump policies are popular. He could buck the trend and do much better than people think.
I agree on that. But do you think there's any dispute that if he loses the House, that he'll get impeached?
Zero dispute.
Zero dispute. Okay, so there are things we can predict with some level of certainty.
We can take to Fort Knox the fact that Trump will be impeached if Democrats even have a one-vote majority in the House.
Going back to Fort Knox, I'd like to go to Fort Knox. I'd like to take a tour of it.
I would too. I think it'd be, they should maybe even have tours. The government could make some money.
I think you and I should go. Matt Schlapp, thank you.
Greta.
Nice to see you. Is a ceasefire with Iran ceasing to exist? Today, the United States military says it bombed radar and drone sites in Iran. These bombings came after, over the weekend, Iran shot down a U.S. drone, but that's not all. U.S. Central Command says that last night, quote, U.S. forces successfully intercepted 2 Iranian ballistic missiles, and those missiles were targeting American forces based in Kuwait. CENTCOM says no one was hurt. But Iranian state TV showed video of the ballistic missile launch, and Iran isn't playing nice. State TV showed what looked like a missile. On it is a picture of Trump with bruises, and the caption, quote, "Until the last American soldier leaves the region," end quote. Retired Navy SEAL and former Deputy Commander of Central Command, Vice Admiral Robert Harward joins me. Nice to talk to you, sir. Has the ceasefire ceased to exist, or can you please explain to me, if you can, where we stand on this war, because it seems rather confusing?
Well, it's clear the IRGC is in control in Iran, and both the negotiations and military operations, and they've distributed that command and control. So you have individual units sometimes operating independently. But again, I have to believe it's to their desire to enhance their positioning if they're going to bargain, and all indicators are they're not, but to continue to reinforce to everyone they control the straits and they still threaten everyone with missiles and drones. And that's going to be a persistent problem as long as the IRGC is in control of the country.
Well, Iran said that it wasn't going to negotiate as long as Israel was going to go into Lebanon. But then President Trump had a conversation, apparently, so it's reported, with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and that's not happening. I guess in order to sort of encourage the negotiations to continue. But the president has called them like boring. He's not even interested in. I forgot the words he used, but he says he's not interested in the negotiations anymore.
Well, I think he's giving them all the options possible so they can capitulate on the two main concerns of the president. One, the Straits of Hormuz. He wants to show he's doing everything he can to get commerce flowing, and everyone understands that. And then, of course, the nuclear issue. So the president's giving them all options to acquiesce on both of those, and yet they'll never do that because it means it derives them of any power they have, and they do become a threat externally and internally. So at the end of the day, all these negotiations are going nowhere.
Well, it seems to me that time is on our side. As long as we cripple them financially with their economy, that it gets worse and worse and worse. And I don't know how. I assume we can wait out the Strait of Hormuz, even though prices are going to go up, and that's really horrible for a lot of people around the globe. But is Iran likely to get? Well, we have this waiting game with this ceasefire and this negotiation. Is Iran likely to get any sort of help or technology on an Iranian weapon from anybody?
Of course, they've been getting assistance from China and the Russians. There's no doubt about it. When I was in Tel Aviv a few weeks ago, they had an assessment that the majority of ISR platforms, Predators and other aircraft that have been brought down in the region were brought down by man-pads, man-operated missiles provided by the Chinese. So there's no doubt this is geopolitically important to both Russia and China, and they're going to support Iran as best they can to undermine our credibility and our alliances in the region. So without a doubt.
But isn't there the line that to be crossed? Do China and Russia, as much as they want to provide weapons so that they can, create problems for the United States, isn't a line that even Russia and China wouldn't want to cross, and that's a nuclear weapon that can be delivered by Iran? Isn't that too much for them?
At this point, but it may not be in the future. But Russia and China and Iran have been attacking us asymmetrically for decades. They've been going after our internet. They've been providing fentanyl. They've been flooding the market with that. So there's all sorts of ways our adversaries have been attacking us for, not directly, because no one wants to challenge our military power, but indirectly. And this is a continuation of that.
I'll tell you who I worry about. I worry about Pakistan because, years ago in the 90s, A.Q. Khan, who's the father of the nuclear weapon in Pakistan, was giving nuclear technology to North Korea, and they certainly didn't mind if North Korea got a nuclear weapon. So I'm suspicious of Pakistan, even though they've been the host of some of the negotiations, that they are our biggest risk of helping Iran with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but Pakistan's in a different situation. Remember the current recent conflict they had with India. Look at what's happening on their border with the Taliban from Afghanistan. So they don't want to alienate anyone any more than they have to because they may rely on help. So I think that avenue of access for Iran and North Korea is dried up, and not in Pakistan's best interest to do that.
I hope you're right, and I hope that my suspicion is just a wild suspicion. Anyway, Vice Admiral Robert Harward, thank you, sir.
Good to be here. Yeah.
Coming up, even if you do not live in Los Angeles, you should care about the race for mayor. I'll tell you why.
You're dangerous.
A very interesting place to be right now. It's been 35 days, as you can see on the counter here behind me, since Nicolas Maduro, the leader of this country, was taken by Delta forces.
Because you're honest.
You don't get political. I don't think actors should.
Thank you. So break the glass.
And I guess this didn't sit too well with one of the Schmidt heads on Newsmax.
What the FCC is supposed to regulate, ABC breaks that law every single night. That is not a comedy show. That is propaganda.
Watch Rob Schmidt, weeknights.
Hey, I'm Dr. Drupinski. I've been looking at the aging process for a long time. Fatty 15 actually slows it down. Fatty 15 comes out of Navy dolphin research. Without the C15, our cells become fragile and age and oxidize. This pushes that back. That's why I take Fatty 15.
Doctors say having a medical emergency kit is like having an urgent care and pharmacy at home. Let me bring in Dr. McCullough to explain more.
Most people know when they're getting sick, but waiting to see a doctor is often too late.
So the key is having medicines before you need them.
Yes, and it includes doctor-prescribed medicines to treat common and serious issues like generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, antibiotics, antivirals for flu, pneumonia, strep, ear and sinus infections, UTIs, and more.
So it is like having an urgent care at home.
Exactly. No waiting, no pharmacy, no copays. You feel better faster and avoid serious complications and hospitalizations.
How do you know what to take?
Just match your symptoms to the doctor-written guide or schedule a quick telehealth call.
Great advice. I understand ordering is fast online, and we've put the website and $45 off code on the screen. Thank you, doctor.
Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code news.
All the plants your yard needs, without the hassle. That's what FastGrowingTrees.com delivers. And every tree comes with our Live and Thrive guarantee. Get the plants you want and the results you'll love. Save now at FastGrowingTrees.com.
Yes, it's the midterm, and there are election jitters in Los Angeles right now because tomorrow is the highly anticipated primary for LA mayor. While President Trump did not give a full endorsement, he did hint one. Recently, he said this about Spencer Pratt, a reality TV personality who hopes to unseat incumbent Mayor Karen Bass.
I'd like to see him do well. He's a character. I don't know him. I assume he probably supports me. Does he support me?
I think so.
I think so, yeah. I heard he does. I heard he's a big MAGA person. He's doing well.
If you're not one of LA's nearly 4 million residents, you may be asking yourself, why should I care about this election? Well, because the issues that haunt LA, such as homelessness, addiction, illegal immigration, house prices, gas prices, those are national issues, and they are highlighted by the severity of the crisis in Los Angeles. Senior correspondent John Huddy is in Los Angeles. John?
Yeah, and Greta, we're getting an up-close and personal view of the crisis here in downtown, in the shadow of downtown LA, in the area known as Skid Row. And one of the reasons that Spencer Pratt and his campaign have gained so much traction and they're doing so well and he's become so successful and has such a large audience is because he's really emphasized and focused on the drug addiction issue, homelessness, and rampant crime throughout LA, not just here in Skid Row, but this is really the epicenter. As I step out of the way, and Mark, you can see, Greta, the line that basically this long homeless encampment going all the way down 5th Street here, and this is what it looks like throughout all of this area known as Skid Row here in downtown LA. You know, the other reason Pratt's been successful and why this race is so close now going into tomorrow's primary between incumbent Mayor Karen Bass and also LA City Councilwoman Nithya Ramna, who is also in the race, and polls are showing that they're kind of flip-flopping with different percentages, but, you know, and very close. But his use of AI-driven technology, the videos that he's posted online that have a huge audience, that are basically have been a hit and have gone viral, attacking Pratt and also attacking Rahman over their issues, or rather Bass and Rahman over their issues. That said, we spoke with here in Skid Row, the so-called mayor of Skid Row. This is a gentleman named Kevin Call, who got that name because of his advocacy for the homeless and his battles basically to end homelessness and addiction here in Los Angeles, who really lambasted Karen Bass. And we also talked to a homeless gentleman about the crisis, how long he's been on the streets. First, you're going to hear from Kevin Call. Have a listen.
I actually had a meeting with her the day she got elected, when she told us that she would turn this city around and she began to work with the homeless. I asked her, what are we going to do about this crisis? We got the Olympics coming here. We got the World Cup coming here. Yeah. All your citizens, as you know
What was her answer?
Well, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But how long can you work on it?
Do you think this will ever go away? You know, Skid Row, the homeless encampments here.
I tell you what, they can clean it up to a certain point. I don't care what they do. It's going to be some stragglers along, you know what I'm saying? But it ain't going to be like this, though. You know, it'll be a lot better. Yeah. And then on top of that, man, I'm going to just tell you the truth. Some get comfortable both down here, knowing they can get something to eat and don't have to work and all that. Yeah, but I ain't with that.
And Greta, actually, as he was talking, we're seeing an LAPD helicopter now circling overhead, and we're hearing a lot of sirens downtown. Who knows what that is? Kevin, by the way, used to live on Skid Row for many years before he was able to clean up and get himself out of there. And one final note, that gentleman that we were talking to, his name is T-Bone on the Streets. He lives on the corner in that basically tent and tarp encampment. And before our interview, he asked Greta if he could have a smoke. And I thought he was talking about a cigarette that he was rolling. But instead, when I said, yeah, he loaded his pipe with rock cocaine, with crack cocaine, and smoked. A really sad, disturbing reminder of what happens every day here in the city of Los Angeles, Greta.
John, did Kevin give you any idea how he got out of there? I mean, what he did to lift himself out?
We didn't really get into that too much. I didn't ask him so much about that. He was able to get clean off of drugs. I didn't have him detail that. And then he just got help and assistance, basically. But we didn't delve too much into that. We just talked about the issue in general and basically the lack of City Hall's response to his request, to his, his hope that this would start to be cleaned up, or at least something would be done to stem this issue. And it's gotten progressively worse, Greta. Just quickly, I used to live down here in Southern California. I grew up in Ventura, which is basically the next county up from LA. I never came down to Skid Row, obviously, because it was too dangerous, but it's gotten way worse. From what I remember years ago, this is not even close to what it was like then. It's gotten progressively worse, and certainly a lot more dangerous, as we're seeing with the LAPD response now, as I'm talking.
And it seems pretty hopeless as well. Anyway, John Huddy, thank you. And what a wild weekend in the race for Maine Senate. Graham Plattner, the likely Democratic nominee for Senate in Maine, saw a bombshell report come out about him. The Wall Street Journal published this article which said, quote, Graham Plattner's wife flagged sexually explicit text to his Senate campaign, end quote. She was simply alerting her husband's campaign about potential problems, and then someone leaked that. His campaign has now confirmed to Politico that Plattner did send sexually explicit text to multiple women while married. Yesterday, with his wife next to him, Plattner said this.
It's no surprise to me that the establishment media outlets are just going to run gossip instead of wanting to talk about the things that actually matter in this race. These people are going to try to make this race about anything but what it's supposed to be about, which is policy. They never want to talk about policy. Amy and I have a very loving and very happy marriage. They would very much like to try to rip that apart.
Senate Democrats had mixed reactions to this report about the sexually explicit text.
Yeah, I have concerns. That guy has questions to answer, and that's what campaigns are for.
First I'll say is, I've been very much focused on the crisis in my home state, so I haven't been able to focus as much on this.
What do you think?
Well, look, right now, for me, I have not met him.
I have not followed this story as closely as others have, but I mean, Graham Plattner is somebody that served our country. He served his community. He's also made mistakes, and he has admitted that. And this race is going to be a contrast between somebody that has put his life on the line for this country against somebody that is literally empowering the moral hollowing out of our nation from the White House.
The Maine primary is coming up on June 9. While Democrats have to answer about Plattner's character, Republicans, as we noted earlier in the show, are facing questions about Republican Congressman from New Jersey, Tom Keene Jr. Keene has not explained a medical absence for about 3 months. He has missed more than 100 votes in Congress. He's not been spotted in Washington nor in his district in New Jersey. 2 weeks ago, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson addressed Keene's absence.
I talked to Tom. It's been a few weeks ago now on the phone, and he sounded good and optimistic, and we're expecting him back here soon. He's had a medical issue, and he's going to be fully transparent and disclose all that. I mean, that's what he told me. But I don't even know the details, and I have to respect that. It's a member's personal privacy on whatever matters they're dealing with. But we expect to have him back soon.
A day later, on May 21st, Keene spoke to the New Jersey Globe by phone. He confirmed his re-election bid. He added, quote, "My doctors are confident that I'm on the road to a full recovery. I understand the need for public transparency. I anticipate that in the next couple of weeks, I will return to voting and the campaign trail," end quote. Co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics, Tom Bevan, joins me. The one thing he didn't say, nice to see you, Tom. The one thing he didn't say, though, is that he's going to tell the American people in his district, what was been going on. He just says he's going to return to vote and he's going to run for re-election. There's a big gap there.
Yeah. I mean, transparency after the fact, is that really transparency? Like, people want to know where he is right now and what's going on. And he's not providing any information. He just keeps saying that he will at some point in the future, which isn't really good enough, especially when you've announced that you're running for re-election, but you can't even seem to fulfill the duties of the job that you're currently in. So it is an issue, an ongoing issue for Republicans.
Graham Plattner, the candidate for Senate in Maine, he says that it's gossip, that we should worry about policy, and the fact that he sent sexually explicit texts is something that is of no moment in voting for him, I guess is the way he would say it. But he's not a first offender in the sense that he's got posts that he took down that were racist. He had a Nazi tattoo. He's sort of looking at one of his little problems, but he's got several problems.
That's right. And he misled people about the tattoo, and he said he had it for 20 years and he didn't know what it was. And then so he covered it up, and he's been a very problematic candidate. And by the way, Janet Mills just told a news outlet in Maine that she has not dropped out of this race and that she may in fact get back into this race. And so I know she's being urged to do that by some Democrats who now look at Plattner and think that he might be just too compromised of a candidate. And I think his explanation there to the media about this, I think was a lie. I think his campaign had already confirmed, as you mentioned, to Politico, that he had sent these texts to these women, and then he said, no, it's a lie. He basically said it was a false story. It was just gossip. He called it journalistic malpractice. So I think this is going to get worse before it gets better for him. And it may end up, if Janet Mills gets back in the campaign, we'll see what happens. As you said, there's still a week or so left, but he's suddenly looking like a real problem.
Well, as we approach the 250th birthday of this country, and we're all proud of our country, and I think to myself, what are the teachers and the parents, as their kids, pay attention to what goes on in Washington, who's running for office? The high school kids who take civics and they learn about who these people are that are running for office. They won't tell us where they are. They don't show up for votes. They send sexually explicit texts. They've got a whole bunch of other problems. There's, it really is sort of disappointing as what some of these candidates, certainly not all of them. There are a lot of very good men and women out there, but it's almost like some of these, these people are really sort of spoiling it.
Yeah, how many times have you looked at, sometimes it's a presidential race or a Senate race and just thought, we're a country of 330 million people, or you're a state of, 10 million or 20 million people. And it's like, this is the best we can do. And part of that is just the process, which, and we've gotten so partisan, and that the fringes dominate these primaries. And so they end up oftentimes with candidates that they will overlook, and this is certainly what's happening in the case with Graham Plattner. They're overlooking all of these personal, foibles and controversies because he excites them on their, he's pushing all the right buttons policy-wise. And obviously, Democrats are eager to take control of the Senate, and they think that, doing away with Susan Collins, if they can beat her, that will almost guarantee them control of the Senate. And so it's about power and it's about ideology instead of about character. And we see that too often these days.
Well, I think they should do in politics like we do in law and the court. We should have a statute of limitations and let people change and let them, recover their, whatever their foils are being put. Like, we shouldn't go back over 15 years and dig up something someone did in college or something and let people change. But some of these things are current. It's like, there's no statute of limitations is going to. Yeah, it's not going to save some of these people, and the whole world is watching.
That's right. And as I said, Democrats, you've seen the reaction that a lot of Democrats have had to this most recent revelation is they've gone to the mats for this guy. And they've said, look, it doesn't matter. I don't care. One guy said he could be sexting my mom. I don't care. Susan Collins, and they're portraying Susan Collins as they're using words like evil. And Susan Collins is exactly the kind of sort of centrist. There's probably no one more centrist in the Republican Party than Susan Collins. And yet she's being portrayed as this sort of right-wing ideologue. And so it comes down to power ultimately. And that's, unfortunately our two parties are geared to maximize their power. We're seeing that with the redistricting wars, and now we're seeing that with these individual races and supporting candidates. And Republicans are doing what they did with Ken Paxton. They're doing it with others. It's just it's a feature, not a bug, of our current political environment.
Yes, it's an unusual time. Anyway, Tom Bevan of Real Clear Politics, thank you.
Thanks, Greta.
Coming up, why is the Department of Justice asking a federal judge to take herself off a case having to do with the election 2020? We're still talking about that. That when the record continues.
Bo Nickel is undefeated and unstoppable. He'll be showing off his knockout power for President Trump for UFC Freedom 250. But first, Bo is stepping into the real octagon. Joining me on The Big Take exclusively today, 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on Newsmax.
There's no way a mouthwash can prevent bad breath for 12 hours.
You're right, Bill. Mouthwash can't, but this is dentist-developed Smart Mouth Activated Mouthwash.
Activated?
Yeah, if your mouthwash isn't activated, it's not Smart Mouth. See, this plus this activate for 12 hours of bad breath prevention, guaranteed. Try it. You won't have bad breath in the morning. Good night, Bill.
Get dentist-developed Smart Mouth today. It's the smarter mouthwash, available at these fine retailers.
Hey, I'm Daniel, one of the founders of Ridge. My dad and I realized that most wallets are falling apart, stuffed to the max, and barely fit in your back pocket. So we set out to create something better. Ridge is built to last a lifetime and is the perfect balance of modern style and durability. Find yours at ridge.com.
Are you ready to save big this summer?
Doesn't everybody want to save money?
The Consumer Cellular Summer Switch event is finally here. You could cut up to 50% off your big wireless bill. And right now, save an extra $50 off with code SAVE50.
Go save some money. It's just a great deal.
You'll get the same fast, reliable nationwide coverage you get from big wireless for up to 50% off.
Same tower, same coverage. I'm getting big wireless coverage without the big wireless price tag. Big cities, small cities, rural areas, rock solid.
Now is the best time to switch all year during the Consumer Cellular Summer Switch event. You could cut up to 50% off your big wireless bill. And right now, save an extra $50 off with code SAVE50.
I switched to save money. I stayed because I love Consumer Cellular.
Consumer Cellular customers ranked us #1 in network coverage satisfaction.
The customer service is amazing.
You get a person right away, and it's inexpensive, too.
Yes.
Get unlimited for just $35 a month for one line.
I got the benefits of ARP and the quality service from Consumer Cellular. So what a happy marriage. It's just a great deal.
You can keep your number, you can keep your phone.
Or get a new one. We've got all the latest phones. You can talk with a U.S.-based sales rep in about 15 seconds.
That phone call reduced my bill by almost 50%.
I'm saving about $50 a month.
The switch process was incredibly easy. Touch a button, and that was it. I was switched. Save money. Save money. Make the switch.
The Summer Switch event is the perfect time to make the switch. You could cut your bill by up to 50% and call right now to save an extra $50 off with code SAVE50. And AARP members save even more. So call now and save big during the Consumer Cellular Summer Switch event. Call 1-800-649-1326. That's 1-800-649-1326.
Think you need a new roof? Think again. Most roofing companies only make money one way, by selling you a new roof. But what if your roof isn't worn out, just dried out? And with just a little love, you could put off an expensive roof replacement for up to 15 years, at a fraction of the cost of a new roof. Newsmax is a scientifically engineered restoration formula that brings your shingle life back to new. Scan the code and get a free spring roof tune-up with your Newsmax restoration.
That's right, we have an update alert. Georgia's 2020 election fight rages on. On Friday, the Department of Justice asked federal judge Eleanor Ross, who's overseeing the case, to recuse herself. Why? Well, the DOJ says Judge Ross attended an event honoring Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. The DOJ says this connection raises questions about Ross' ability to remain impartial. In 2024, as you will recall, DA Willis was removed from President Trump's election interference case in Georgia. Friday's DOJ filing also identifies Ross as the federal judge who is reprimanded privately for having sex with a top uniformed police officer in the judge's chambers. The investigation conducted by the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit has not publicly named those involved. Judge Ross has not commented on the DOJ's request that she remove herself from the case. Newsmax legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, Jay Town, joins me. Jay, she should get off the case. What is she thinking?
You know, judges are a lot like, if you were to explain them, Greta, to someone who's not a lawyer, they're like an umpire, right? They're like a referee. And like umpires and referees, the judges should never be the story. In addition to those other reports, she went to a Fani Willis event, who's only famous because of her indictment and attempted prosecution of the former president of the United States. So here the president is trying to litigate for election integrity, and she's going to celebrate the prosecutor who tried to take him down for the same election integrity that the litigation regards. And so this is quite staggering what's been going on in Georgia, frankly. What began as investigations into election interference have become a series of investigations into the investigators themselves.
Well, she's a federal judge, so she has a lifetime appointment, and I think every juror who looks at her as she's picking them is looking at her and thinking about all her personal activities in the chambers that everyone is snickering about. But I don't know what's wrong with all these judges. I mean, look at Judge Merchan in New York on the Trump case. He didn't take himself off the case. And it's not necessarily that they've done anything wrong. It's like we lawyers take ourselves off case when it has the appearance of some that we're going to be partial, appearance of impropriety. But these judges just don't care.
Yeah, and I remember talking about Judge Merchan and how his daughter's political firm stood to gain financially from the trial itself. And, you know, the appearance of impropriety or impropriety itself, they both have the same net effect on our justice system, which is that the trust and confidence in it wanes when there is that appearance of impropriety. Judges know that. And why they would want to hold on to a particular case, you know, for whether it's 15 minutes or they have already predetermined the outcome of it, and anything in between. It's very disturbing because that's not our justice system, Greta.
Well, the federal judges, I mean, have a particular sense of entitlement with that lifetime appointment, you know, and I think, you know, that I think they forget that they know what their job is. Now they owe it to us, but. I don't know. This one, you know, she got to go. She got to take herself off this case. I don't think she will, though. Do you?
No, I don't. I mean, I thought Merchan would, and that was the best possible conflict of interest we could have come up with, and he said no. So I think you're right. There's a certain arrogance to federal judges these days, and we saw that again today in a couple of federal cases involving the Department of War's trans policy and the anti-weaponization fund.
Well, except the president has said that the anti-weaponization fund, he's going to follow the judge's order. He's not going to go forward with that. So that's the news on the anti-weaponization fund, which was highly controversial, and even Republicans, there are a lot of Republicans who didn't like it. Jay Town, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Greta.
And a grisly discovery, a hiker in New Mexico found the body of a scientist who last year disappeared. Melissa Casilla vanished in June of 2025. Her disappearance was linked to a larger group of scientists and government employees who had bizarrely vanished or died under mysterious circumstances. The group of 11 scientists and government employees all have ties to U.S. nuclear secrets or rocket technology. The New Mexico State Police say they were notified on Thursday that the body was found at a state national forest. Authorities say a handgun was found alongside her body. The cause of death is under investigation. Coming up, she faked cancer, and then I'll tell you in our outrage of the day when the record continues.
Tonight's Newsmax lineup is brought to you by Crown Atlantic. Protect what matters most with fast, affordable life insurance. Visit lifeforless.com.
Hey, I'm Dr. Drupinski. I've been a physician for 4 decades. I've been looking at the aging process for a long time, and Fatty 15 is one product that actually slows it down. Fatty 15 comes out of Navy dolphin research. A brilliant veterinarian realized that dolphins get disease much like humans. She looked at what predisposed to those problems, isolated the molecule, gave it to the animals, they didn't get the problem. Without the C15, our cells become fragile and age and oxidize. This pushes that back. Cell health equals physical health. That's why I take Fatty 15.
It's 2 a.m., your fever spiked and you're miserable. Here's your options.
Urgent care, closed. ER, slammed, and you'll spend hundreds of thousands in both. Telehealth, yeah, but the pharmacies are closed.
That's the reason why we keep emergency medical kits at home.
It has doctor-prescribed medication like generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other antibiotics and antivirals. You can treat flu, pneumonia, strep, sinus infections, UTIs, and more.
Because if you're sick in at night, traveling or stranded, you don't want options.
You want what is inside this kit. No waiting, no pharmacy, and no copays.
Just schedule a quick telehealth call.
And that's how you feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
Every family should have this kit, and here's how to order yours.
Order online in minutes and use the promo code to save $45. Your doctor-prescribed kit ships fast to your door, packed with medications to treat over 30 conditions. So when something hits, you're ready. And a wellness company telehealth doctor is always there if you need guidance.
Hello, this is WWE Hall of Fame wrestler Mick Foley. Across this great country, there are thousands of veterans with no place to call home. They deserve better.
Welcome to my new home.
The Tunnel to Towers Foundation is committed to eradicating veteran homelessness by providing housing and critical services.
Couldn't ask for anything more.
Please help by donating $11 a month at T2T.org. The Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Let us do good.
Planning that perfect family vacation? Turns out, the fix is right here. Create new lifetime memories from the comfort of your backyard. No passports, no reservations. Latham's premium handcrafted pools can be installed in weeks. Our pools won't stain or crack and never require costly resurfacing. And with our crystal finish, you can bring your favorite exotic watercolor and shimmer right to your own backyard. Summer installation is still possible. Visit lathampool.com today.
If your roof looks like this, your home is at risk. A new metal roof from Erie Home withstands wind up to 120 miles per hour and hail up to 2 inches, all backed by a 50-year warranty. Call now for 50% off installation. Get your free estimate now.
Relay gives us visibility into not just the amount of money we have, but the work that it's doing. And it gives us something to build toward without so much of the financial anxiety that we had before.
Look what I just found. No ding decline on the Experian app. They show me credit cards that won't hurt my credit if I'm not approved. Turns out I care about my credit health too. Get the app from your big financial friend. Experian.
The protests are not stopping. Over the weekend, protesters in New Jersey clashed with police. It happened outside the Delaney Hall ICE Detention Center. Yesterday, Newark Mayor Ras Baraka, in response to the escalating protests, imposed a curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Arrests were made after protesters violated the curfew. It's unclear how many people were arrested. Demonstrations began in mid-May over inhumane conditions at the center. The curfew will stay in place until further notice. Correspondent Sarah Williamson is in Newark. Sarah.
Hey Greta, good to be with you. That curfew seems to have worked and the temperature has really lowered significantly. I've been here all week and we have seen the chaos that has unfolded as the night progresses and things get a little darker, but that's not going to happen this time. We're about half a mile down the road from Delaney, and you can see the implementation of the state police here who are blocking off that road and allowing the traffic to only use one lane, and they're sort of bringing it in both directions up here, monitoring who can come through and checking their purpose for traveling on this road. Because even though the curfew isn't put in place anymore, no foot traffic can still travel up the road. So now we have the protesters who are just gathering here on the side of the road. They do seem a little defeated by the authorities, and there is a lot less here now than we have seen throughout the week. And they don't really seem to be interacting with the state police because that's not who they have their problem with. They have their problem with ICE. We heard from Mark Wayne Marlin, the DHS secretary earlier, who spoke exactly about this.
The left, they want to demonize our ICE officers every single day, but really they're enforcing the laws that these individuals that want to demonize them, the congressmen and senators and even governors that want to go out and say they're breaking the Constitution and that they're, I'll call them all these horrific names. The truth is not one thing they can point to where they say they ever broke the Constitution.
So, Greta, what you can see now, this image on your screen, is something that I shot earlier this morning. Delaney Hall is completely vacant of protesters, and the number of ICE agents that are stationed out the front has also significantly decreased. And their so-called autonomous zone that they have there now stands vacant. But if you can just come back to me now, you can see we have one protester who started mouthing off. I'll see if the microphone can hear him. Okay, we just heard some profanities there, so perhaps we won't do that. But it's always around this time, Greta, at around 4 p.m, when maybe people get off work, that things do start to escalate. So although today has been reasonably calm in comparison to what we've seen all week, who knows what may happen as the night progresses.
Sarah Williamson, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And it's time for our outrage of the day. Okay, you're not going to believe this one. It is so outrageous. The FBI is looking for a woman who allegedly faked a cancer diagnosis and scammed people out of almost $12,000 in donations. Here's the story. The FBI says back in 2015, Vanessa O'Rourke from Pennsylvania claimed she had terminal brain cancer. And then she told friends and family that she needed money to go to Australia for treatment. They gave her the money and she went to Australia. But instead of getting treatment, she had a vacation. And then she came back to the United States for more. After returning from Australia, she convinced her family and friends to set up fundraisers for her treatment. The public rallied around her, donating thousands of dollars to what they thought was her cancer treatment. And then she used that money for another vacation. In 2018, the Department of Justice indicted her on 15 counts of wire fraud and had a warrant issued for her arrest. And since then, she's been on the run. She's on the FBI's most wanted list. Her last known residence was Queensland, Australia. And another story with some outrage. A man in upstate New York was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison for murdering his girlfriend and his 11-year-old son. In March of last year, David Huff entered his stepfather's house and then shot and killed his girlfriend and his own son. He also pointed the gun at his stepfather, but the gun malfunctioned. In April of this year, Huff pleaded guilty to the murders. At his sentencing, a disturbing moment. While the judge read the details of his murders, Huff was seen laughing and smiling.
You find this funny?
No, it's a joke stuck in my head. Go on. I'm listening.
You find this funny?
No, it's a joke stuck in my head. Go on.
During the sentencing, the judge said this.
While the families of your victims grieved, you laughed. And now, in your pre-sentence report, you claim it was an accident. Your actions are reprehensible, and you deserve to be incarcerated for the rest of your life. And Mr. Huff, even a sentence of life is not long enough for you.
Huff will serve at least 40 years behind bars. Coming up, there are a few things you should not do while flying. That when the record continues.
250 years ago, a nation was forged by grit, by courage, by freedom. Today, we raise a glass to that same spirit. 4547 Straight Bourbon Whiskey, the 250th Anniversary Edition. Bold, independent, unmistakably American. Toast to independence this year. Built by patriots, for patriots. Order yours today.
Every day, bumps and bangs happen. Bruises are optional. Use daily dermatologist-recommended Dermend and reduce the appearance of bruises. Get Dermend Moisturizing Bruise Cream in the first aid aisle.
Thanks to Jointivia, I'm back in the swing of things. Wait, $70 for a refill?
You gotta try Single Care. Just look up your prescription, show the coupon at the pharmacy, and save.
See why more people are saving with Single Care.
The biggest selection of plants and trees, perfect for your yard. That's what FastGrowingTrees.com delivers. From privacy and fruit trees to shrubs, flowering trees, houseplants, and more. Straight to your door. Fast Growing Trees has more plants than you'll find at a garden center. And every tree comes with our Alive and Thrive guarantee. Get the plants you want and the results you'll love at fastgrowingtrees.com. Save now on your best yard.
You're careful about what you bring home when shopping, especially when it comes to feeding your family. Shouldn't your investments work the same way? At Timothy Plan, we offer a wide selection of mutual funds and ETFs that can help you allocate assets without compromising your values. From technology to healthcare, energy to real estate, our funds are not only diverse but uncompromising to your values. Timothy Plan funds are filtered to avoid companies involved in abortion, pornography, human trafficking, and other harmful agendas. What you invest in should reflect what you stand for. Are your investments bearing good fruit? What's in your portfolio? Contact your financial advisor today to find out, or contact Timothy Plan directly at 1-800-TIM-PLAN to discover more. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
When it comes to my daily heart health supplement, I've got 3 rules. It's got to be plant-based, it's got to be doctor recommended, and it's got to be Super Beets from Human.
Super Beets is the #1 cardiologist recommended beet brand for heart health support with clinically studied grapeseed extract for nearly 2 times more effective blood pressure support than diet and exercise alone.
Super Beets works. I swear by it, and I know you're going to love it too.
Try Super Beets today at human.com.
Imagine being on this flight. A United Airlines flight bound for Spain was forced to make a U-turn and fly back to Newark, New Jersey's International Airport. Why? Well, there was a mid-flight security incident. Here's audio from the air traffic control tower.
There's a security detail out there. Someone had a Bluetooth speaker and they named it a certain 4-letter word, so they have to inspect the whole aircraft, including the cargo area, that passengers have to evacuate. That's crazy.
So what was the 4-letter word that the device was named? It was named bomb. Authorities say the device was a digital watch known as a Fitbit. It reportedly belonged to a 16-year-old passenger. The word bomb appeared on nearby phones, in-flight entertainment systems, and crew devices. The cabin crew was notified of the device's name. They asked passengers to turn off all Bluetooth devices or else they would return to Newark. But the device remained active. So as a precaution, the plane heading to Spain had to turn around and head back to Newark. After landing, passengers had to deplane and be rescreened by the TSA and CBP. Port Authority police then swept the entire aircraft. Passengers boarded a replacement flight with a new crew. According to authorities, the unidentified teen and device were not seen as a threat. And you will absolutely love this, a heroic rescue in Cape Cod. On May 22nd, 2 police officers from the Barnstable Police Department responded to a blazing house fire. According to the police department, once officers McNeese and Corbett arrived on the scene, they quickly ran into the house and cleared the house of any residents. Body cam footage shows Corbett picking up a dog and running out of the house. Officer McNeese grabbed a fire extinguisher to help put out the flames. Officer Corbett, who rescued the dog, named Scooby, later reunited the dog and his owner. Coming up, a homecoming that took more than 80 years. That one, the record continues.
Closed captioning by America Tax Group. Stop IRS and state collections. Free consultation. Call now.
America Tax Group is the nation's leading tax firm that has helped millions of taxpayers resolve penalties, remove liens, and stop wage garnishments. If you're dealing with IRS or state tax issues, don't wait. Call now.
Attention! Do you owe money to the IRS? If you owe $10,000 or more, you must hear this message because new Trump-era tax policy changes are providing relief to the American taxpayer. IRS policy changes in 2025 and 2026 have created new ways to resolve debt. Tax Relief Helpers knows exactly how to navigate them and could help you save thousands. Just call 800-357-9528 to protect your assets, home, and retirement.
I owed $87,000 in taxes. Tax Relief Helpers got the amount I owed down to just $3,500. I saved $83,500.
I got behind on my taxes and I owed $48,000. I called, and after they told me about the changes at the IRS, they got my bill fully removed.
We save Americans millions of dollars in tax debt every year, and we can help you. Call right now to take advantage of the latest Trump-era tax deductions to protect your assets, home, and retirement from the IRS. The call and consults are absolutely free. Call 800-357-9528. That's 800-357-9528. Attention! Do you owe money to the IRS? If you owe $10,000 or more, you must hear this message because new Trump-era tax policy changes are providing relief to the American taxpayer. IRS policy changes in 2025 and 2026 have created new ways to resolve debt. Tax Relief Helpers knows exactly how to navigate them and could help you save thousands. Just call 800-357-9528 to protect your assets, home, and retirement.
I owed $87,000 in taxes. Tax Relief Helpers got the amount I owed down to just $3,500. I saved $83,500.
I got behind on my taxes and I owed $48,000. I called, and after they told me about the changes at the IRS, they got my bill fully removed.
We save Americans millions of dollars in tax debt every year, and we can help you. Call right now to take advantage of the latest Trump-era tax deductions to protect your assets, home, and retirement from the IRS. The call and consult are absolutely free. Call 800-357-9528. That's 800-357-9528.
The Ridge wallet is iconic at this point, but I'm just going to speak facts here. It's slim, it's RFID blocking, it's awesome, it's comfortable, I love it. I carry it every day. And then every wallet at Ridge.com has like an unlimited lifetime warranty, so you don't have to worry about it falling apart. Check it out at Ridge.com.
What if you're sick at home or traveling and can't get medical help or prescriptions? Doctors say a medical emergency kit is the answer. Joining me is Dr. Drew.
Thank you. And yes, these kits put you in charge of your health. They come with physician-prescribed medication to treat multiple common and some serious issues as well.
What are some examples?
Sure. Generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other essential antibiotics and antivirals that treat flu, pneumonia, strep, ear infections, sinus infections, urinary tract infections, and more.
So it is like urgent care and a pharmacy at home?
Exactly. No waiting, no pharmacy, no co-pays. You feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
How do you know what medicines to take?
You just match your symptoms to the doctor-written guide or schedule a quick telehealth call.
Sound advice. Order online in minutes at the website below and save $45. Thank you, doctor.
Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code news.
We can all agree, steak is for dads. Grill dads, charcoal dads, tongue-snapping dads, united by their love of steak. His perfect gift is waiting, plus 8 free burgers at omahasteaks.com.
It took 85 years, but it finally happened. A hero's welcome home for a U.S. Navy sailor who was killed during the attack on Pearl Harbor. The sailor, Fireman Third Class Royal Bradford Luker, was only 17 years old in 1941. He was serving aboard the USS West Virginia when Pearl Harbor was attacked. The ship was hit by at least 2 bombs and 7 torpedoes. More than 100 crew members were killed. On Saturday, after 85 years since he was killed, Luker's remains were returned to his home state of Arkansas. Hundreds were in attendance for the procession. It was led by Arkansas State Police. Luker was missing until his remains were identified through advances in DNA technology. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders ordered flags lowered in honor of Luker. Luker was also awarded full military honors for his valor and his sacrifice. And don't forget, I have a new podcast called Greta Wire. You'll like it. It's different. You can subscribe now on your favorite podcast apps such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at newsmax.com/listen. Thanks for watching. Ed Henry, The Big Take, is next. Stay with Newsmax.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.